Good morning and welcome to the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Senator Suzanne Geist. I represent the 25th District here in Lincoln and Lancaster County. I serve as chair of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. We will start off having members of the committee and the committee staff do introductions, starting on my right with Senator Frederickson.
Thank you, Chair Geist. Good morning. My name is John Frederickson. I represent District 20, which is in central West Omaha.
Mike Moser, District 22. It's Platte County and parts of Stanton County.
Bruce Bostelman, District 23, Saunders, Butler, Colfax counties.
Barry DeKay, District 40, representing Holt, Knox, Cedar, Antelope, northern part of Pierce, and most of Dixon County.
We also have Mike Hibble, our committee counsel, and Carolyn Nebel, who is our committee clerk. Also assisting us are our pages, Caitlin from UNL, and she's a history major, and then Matea, who is also from UNL, and she is a political science major. This morning we'll be hearing, we'll have a confirmation hearing and one bill, and we'll take them up in the order that's listed on the outside of the room. On the table near the entrance of the room, you will find blue testifier sheets. If you're planning to testify today, please fill one out, hand it to the pages when you come up. This will help us keep an accurate record of the hearing. If you do not wish to testify but would like to record your presence at the hearing, please fill out the gold sheet on the table near the entrance. Also, I would like to note the legislature's policy that all letters for the record must be received by the committee by noon the day prior to the hearing. Any handouts submitted by testifiers will also be included as part of the record as exhibits. We would ask if you have any handouts that you please bring 10 copies and give them to the pages. If you need additional copies, the pages will be able to provide those for you. Understand that senators may come and go during our hearings. This is common and it's required, as they may be presenting bills in other committees. Our hearing will run with testimony for each bill, beginning with the introducer's opening statement. After the opening statement, we will hear from any supporters of the bill, and then any in opposition, followed by those speaking in the neutral capacity. The introducer of the bill will then be given the opportunity to make closing statements if they wish to do so. We ask that you begin your testimony by giving us first your name, and please spell it for the record. We will be using a 5-minute light system. When you begin your testimony, the light on the table will turn green. The yellow light comes on as your 1-minute warning. And then when the red light comes on, we ask that you would wrap up your final thoughts. I will remind everyone, including senators, to please turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate. And with that, we will go to the confirmation hearing of Vicki Kramer for Department of Transportation. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairwoman Geist and fellow members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Vicki Kramer, V-I-C-K-I-K-R-A-M-E-R. I'm appearing before you to seek confirmation for my appointment by Governor Pillen as the Director of the Nebraska Department of Transportation. I've appreciated the opportunity to meet with the majority of you over the last week to discuss your priorities and expectations for the department. Based on our conversations, our team pulled together the binder before you to provide details on the scope of the mission of the department, as well as some project timelines. A little bit about me. I'm a Nebraskan. I've spent my career working towards the needs of our state. I was raised in UTN, received my bachelor's degree from the University of Nebraska at Kearney, and my master's degree in public administration from the University of Nebraska at Omaha. I served our country in our state as a chemical and human resources officer in the Nebraska Army National Guard. The last 13 years of service have taught me leadership, sacrifice, and strategic thinking. I have 15 years of policy experience at the local, state, and federal level. Going back to my days with the Nebraska's federal delegation, taking the issues of constituents and crafting policy to positively impact the quality of life of constituents. My portfolios have included everything from economic development, outreach, and transportation to military and veterans affairs. I've gained experience with federal and state agencies, creating an understanding of motivators and how to influence action. I've learned how to leverage knowledge and relationships to create opportunity for Nebraskans. After leaving the U.S. Senate, I served as a senior policy advisor to the Nebraska Adjutant General We had the opportunity to work closely with the military department and NEMA, experience that was highly valuable during the 2019 flooding. When I joined the Department of Transportation in 2016, it was in the final development stages of the Transportation Innovation Act. Over the next several years, the legislature, this committee, continued to provide more opportunity for the department to streamline processes and improve the efficiency of the project delivery process. Then came the 2019 flood. We, in the department, the state, were tested, and I'm incredibly proud of the work we did to restore the connectivity. It tested every pocket of the organization and touched every aspect of our mission. Coordinating the public outreach and managing the communications to cities and counties while working with our engineering and construction teams on innovative solutions to safely restore the transportation system was one of the highlights of my career. My time at the department fostered personal growth and provided a foundation of knowledge, but also created a curiosity of how infrastructure owners were tackling the challenges of the industry. I joined Kiewit, a North American-wide Nebraska-based engineering and construction company, in 2020. That curiosity and my experience with project delivery drove me to further explore how transportation policy considerations influence the ability for DOTs to operate efficiently. I quickly gravitated towards using the resources of one of the country's most sophisticated firms to identify best practices and innovative options. A key role of mine was helping infrastructure owners and agencies determine the most efficient way to deliver projects and collaboratively assess and mitigate risks that impact project schedule and cost. I work closely with local governments, DOTs, USDOT, Federal Highway Administration, Corps of Engineers on issues that plague procurement and impact the ability to manage infrastructure development across the country. All of this provided me with a solid foundation to help further transportation, not only in Nebraska, but nationally. At my core, I'm a policy expert that's developed a knack for creative problem solving and program execution. I thrive best in collaborative environments and am familiar with the internal and external stakeholders of the department. Though I'm not a licensed engineer, I have the advantage of more than 65 years of engineering experience on my executive team. I've spent my life driving the roads of Nebraska and much of my career listening to the needs of the communities. I understand the department's impact on the livelihoods of Nebraskans and how much they depend on the services provided by the department. I will build off the initiatives of the last 8 years to ensure partnerships and collaboration efforts continue to improve the customer experience. The areas where I expect to spend most of my attention include safety, workforce development, relationship building, and customer service. All of these areas feed into the overlaying key tasks of project delivery. Safety is the foundation of our mission and how we design roads and how they're maintained, and education for users and how we protect our teammates and construction partners in work zones. Safety leads the conversation. While I'm hopeful that technology will continue to yield positive impacts on safety, we must exert significant energy on improving the safety of our roads. An effective safe system approach requires strong partnerships with locals and FHWA as we look to maintain and modernize the system to reduce risk and minimize potential impacts. These partnerships are paramount to ensuring NDOT provides safe and reliable system. Every major crash or fatality comes across my desk. When I get in the car with Jackson and Oscar, their safety is my utmost concern. Drivers today face more distractions and temptations than ever before. And I believe modeling a culture of prioritizing safety is paramount to ensuring we work towards zero deaths. Investing in and attracting and retaining employees is a crucial component of project delivery. Our NDOT teammates possess critical skills and knowledge, and all roles are necessary to contributing to the department's success. To meet the needs of our industry, we must start competing for talent in grade school, to start the curiosity young, to develop tomorrow's engineers and construction professionals at an early age so they understand the impact they can have. Partnerships are vital to this concept, and I plan to work closely with Nebraska's engineering and construction community to flesh out a plan on how we can improve mentoring and outreach to grow talent. Taking our partnership efforts and expanding on them with more deliberate efforts will be necessary over the next 8 years. The bipartisan infrastructure law, coupled with the Build Nebraska and Transportation Innovation Act, provide an unparalleled opportunity to improve Nebraska's transportation system. A coordinated approach between NDOT, local and federal partners will be necessary to fully realize the potential benefits. NDOT's Local Assistance Division continues to support local organizations with the execution of federal funds. In the short time I've been with the department, discussions have already been held in multiple areas on where, to what extent, how we can provide support, and where we need more resources to do more. This is an area I expect to work closely with the governor and this committee on how we can be impactful. I don't think I fully appreciated how personal transportation is until I had the opportunity to come to the department. Everyone uses the transportation system. Efficient mobility is vital to the good quality of our system and our life. Our system serves Nebraska, whether it's providing reliable routes to hospitals or improving freight corridors to support economic growth, and works to exceed the expectation of communities in which we serve, with the goal of providing a safe and reliable system. After safety and linked to safety, asset preservation, maintaining our system is our bread and butter. It's an area we know well. As with system modernization, we need to continue to stay in tune with the industry on ways to leverage technology and innovation to get the most out of the pavement and structures. All of these areas come together as the department looks to support the broadband office and Governor Pillen's vision of providing affordable, accessible, dependable, and high-speed broadband to Nebraska. Again, many of these concepts are areas the department's been focusing on for years. I understand they've been the focus of previous leadership, but I believe we must continue to engage industry and our peers on resources available and technology advances to leverage new ways to deliver the system capable of supporting Nebraska's growing and evolving needs. This is a big challenge, but the pieces are there, and this body helped put them there, and we have an opportunity. The next 10 years in transportation and broadband deployment will be pivotal. We've been given the resources and now lies on the shoulder of the DOT to deliver. So I'm thankful. I'm thankful to Governor Pillen's trust, the support of the department, the partnerships with industry, and the relationships with our federal and state partners. Thankful for the opportunity to leverage a unique skill set that I've been cultivating over the last 15 years for an opportunity such as this. We have work to do, and I'm committed. I'll be open and transparent with this committee and bring you into the extent you want to be involved. Our team will be collaborative. I'll value your feedback. This approach and emphasis on partnership and collaboration will be what I lean on as we navigate the next 8 years. You'll see me apply my policy knowledge and experience coupled with my ability to navigate project delivery and innovative finance options while bringing people together to enhance innovation for creative problem solving. I'm thankful and humbled by the trust Governor Pillen has put in me to lead the DOT. It's a pivotal time in transportation, and to have the opportunity is an honor. With that, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Members of the committee have questions for the applicant? Senator Bostelman.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Moser, thank you, Mr. Kramer, for being here. The question I have, and you was about this before, is obviously there's contracts come in that are licensed engineers, PEs, they're stamped. Those drawings come in, that's something that DOT is responsible for. Not being a licensed engineer, how do you plan to handle that within the department?
Senator, what we've done is created a memo that actually gives that authority to the Deputy Director for Engineering. So it'll be a delegated task. So I'll still be able to provide the leadership and the policy support while that engineering requirements will be held by the Deputy Director of Engineering.
Thank you.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and your willingness to serve our state. You don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, but it seems like all of your work touches on so many things that the Department of Transportation doesn't quite feel like an appropriate name. It seems like it's more of a Department of Infrastructure. And you don't have to say if you agree with that or not, because that maybe is more political than you wanted to get. But do you feel like your department, like you said, not an engineering background, but you do touch on so many different aspects. And a policy background, I think, is really an interesting approach to this. I love public policy, so I'm a big fan. How do you deal with the broadband piece of things? I mean, you can't be an expert in all things, so maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
No. So I think in terms of infrastructure, it's really mobility is our main goal, right? The movement of people and service, people and goods. When it comes to broadband, it's connectivity. And it's also looking at the resources we have within the department. And we are experts when it comes to executing federal funds. We have quite a bit of outreach. Most of our all of our federal projects require NEPA, which has a public involvement aspect of it. So when you look at the resources and the talent already within the organization, there's an opportunity to leverage those in order to provide support for Nebraska in other ways.
Just a follow-up question. So we have the Department of Administrative Services. Do you work closely with them on these contracts that you're bidding out?
We do. And procurement is a specialty of mine. And so, yes, we work with DIS in a lot of our procurements for oversight, but also we have an entire department that's been doing this for decades.
I may want to talk to you outside of here, more about procurement because it's an interest of mine. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Senator Frederickson.
Thank you, Vice Chair Moser. Thank you for being here and again for your willingness to serve. I think you summarized the department well, mobility and connectivity. I think that's a great way to summarize things. I really appreciate your focus on safety specifically, and that you highlighted that. That's a big concern of mine personally. But I know you and I spoke previously about this as well, the workforce development piece. And I think this is an issue that we're seeing statewide across multiple industries. And I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more to your thoughts on how do we best approach that issue as a state.
It's not just statewide, it's nationally.
Yeah.
And that's why in order to keep the talent in Nebraska and also continue to recruit the talent to the state to be able to fill the needs, we've got to be creative. It's got to start young. There's a shortage of engineers. There's a shortage of skilled craft. So we have to be able to work at multiple different levels to make sure that we do have the engineering capabilities as well as the construction capabilities. That's an important aspect and something that I feel strongly about. I don't think the department can do it alone. I really want to work with this body in understanding at the tactical level, how do we retain our teammates? And at the more strategic level, how do we lay out a foundation so that for 20 years from now, we're not dealing with the same issue?
Yeah.
So we've got to develop as well as retain.
I really appreciate that that's on your radar, and I think that's going to be really essential for our state's future. And I think that ties directly into broadband as well. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Other questions? Senator Decay.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mosier, Ms. Kramer. We talked previously, when it comes to the infrastructure, roads, bridges, et cetera, in the state of Nebraska, is there a kind of a specific blueprint or outline that you go by to prioritize, or is it based on needs, safety, or all of the above, or how do you guys?
That's a good question. When we did the TIA's prioritization, it was an economic development, safety prioritization process, right? So we introduced a new way of kind of thinking about that had a public involvement aspect of it. So we went out and talked to the different communities to understand what the need is, while we also did a formula with some consultants to understand where it was in the level of service that the current system was providing. And so as we look at this, IIJA gave us an opportunity to potentially have a bigger impact. And so we're going through things right now. For example, I know that bridges are a big topic, bridges and structures. And so understanding that the bridge formula funds that we have within the departments are going to make a dent in what we can do going forward. We're looking at that prioritization process and how that applies to our current process. There's about a 30-40% increase in our overall formula funding on the whole transportation system. So we're working through it. We've been working through it for the last year. I think we'll have more to come. The one thing I've heard from this body is more transparency with that project process. The other thing I think I owe you is where are the impacts? How could I potentially impact that project and expedite it? So we'll look forward to working with the committee as well as the governor's office on making that information available.
Thank you. I look forward to future conversations with you.
Thanks, Senator.
Okay, other questions from the committee? When you came by to talk to me just the other day, we talked a little bit about the completion of the expressway system. And I didn't hear Senator Decay's question. I hope this isn't a repeat of his question, because he's got a bill on completing Highway 81. But how can we streamline that process to try to get that completed the very quickest that we can possibly do?
The expressway system or the one corridor? Because I can address the expressway system. I think we're already working through it. So when we originally started out, we were in the 2040s, right? We've brought that down to 2036 and now 2033 for when we expect everything to be under construction, all elements of the expressway system. And so where we're working right now is with the new resources in terms of IIJA funds and potential other resources that may be coming through this body. How would that influence and how would we expedite those projects? We've got some plans. If you look at the documents that I provided to you, the Highway 81 will go into planning this year. And so we'll continue to work towards that 42 miles of corridor. I think that there are some innovative options that we can look at in terms of project delivery models that may expedite that process. We're probably 6 months from having a better plan. And so I'll work with you over the next couple of months so you understand what elements come into that and play a part, and that what can influence it. And I think
Well, I appreciate that. I think in the past, we had kind of parallel universes when we were talking about expressways and what the Department of Roads took as their mission, and then what the legislature was kind of jerking at the leash, trying to lead their direction. So I hope we can work together to accomplish those goals more quickly. And I think that and I'm sure many others would be willing to give you what you think you need to get this done. We got permitting, funding, political questions. There's just no end to the all the loose ends that you have to get tucked away before you can buckle the briefcase shut. And there's always something hanging out that delays us. And sometimes I feel like there's an 8-ball somewhere, that they magic 8-ball and they turn it over and the answer is, permitting is a problem. And then you turn it over and come back up and, there's local jurisdictional problems. And, it's just really frustrating. So you've worked in that kind of a environment where things are ethereal and not always objective, I guess. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, yes, Senator Decay.
Thank you. I would just like to say again that from our prior conversations and stuff, I really appreciate your insight in what we talked about. I look forward to our conversations. As a legislator, I don't want to impede any progress. I'd like to be able to move projects forward, and however we can work and collaborate going forward, I relish those conversations. So thank you.
Department is too. Thank you, Senator.
All right, thank you very much for your testimony. Is there anyone else to speak to the in support of Ms. Kramer's nomination? Anybody to speak in support? Okay, is there anyone to speak in opposition? Seeing none. Is there anyone to speak in the neutral capacity? Okay, that should conclude our hearing on the nomination of Vicki Kramer. Thank you very much. Now we'll open the hearing on LB 122 by Senator Bostelman, changing provisions relating to the One Call Notification System Act. Senator Bostelman.
Thank you. Good morning, Vice Chairman Moser, members of Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Bruce Bostelman, spell that BRUCE-BOSTELMAN, and I represent Legislative District 23. I'm here today to introduce LB 122, which is intended to improve enforcement of violations on the Nebraska One Call system. Our One Call system has two goals. The first goal is to ensure the safety of Nebraska's contractors and citizens who work around underground utilities. The second goal is to protect Nebraska's underground utility infrastructure from damage. To make sure we're meeting both of those goals as best as we can, we need an efficient and effective enforcement system for violations. For those of you that have served previously on this committee, one call is a familiar topic. We've had bills over the last several sessions aimed at improving the time between the filing of a one-call complaint and the time it is resolved. Right now, the time period can be 2 or 3 years if a complaint is resolved at all, and that is far too long. What I have learned from previous hearings is that there are 2 main problems that cause this delay. First, there is no staff dedicated to investigating the complaints that are filed. Second, there is no modified process for small first-time violations to be dealt with quickly, a small claims court of sorts. Why is it important to have such staffing for investigators? Right now, one attorney in the Attorney General's office dedicates a portion of their time to doing all of the following: receiving complaints, investigating those complaints, and prosecuting those complaints that require it. As we have heard, there is simply not enough bandwidth there for all of these things to be done. So it is an issue of staffing. It is also awkward that our current system makes the Attorney General's office both the investigator and the enforcer. We have heard from them in the past that this makes it difficult to prosecute complaints because it is difficult for an attorney to be their own witness. LB 122 proposes to fix this problem by having one-call complaints filed with the State Fire Marshal's office. Once filed, the complaints would be investigated by staff in the Fire Marshal's office. In other contexts, State Fire Marshal staff already has the responsibility to investigate underground excavation accidents. It makes sense to have experienced staff investigate complaints once they are filed, and to give the responsibility to someone other than those charged of prosecuting violations. That should free up time for the Attorney General's office to focus on resolving complaints and violations more efficiently. As to my second point, the need for a modified small claims type of process. What we have heard in the past is that with the limited time and manpower that we have to spend on them, the Attorney General's office focuses their attention on the large, significant, most serious complaints and violations. That makes sense. But what it also means is that many of the complaints that are filed for more minor, first-time violations are never addressed. LB 122 seeks to solve that problem by creating an underground excavation safety committee, a HIT court in shorthand, and gives it limited authority to resolve these types of complaints and violations. As drafted, LB 122 would cap the committee's authority to levy fines at $10,000. It would also give the committee the authority to assess non-monetary penalties like continuing education. The concept in creating the committee and at the same time limiting its authority is to have a small claims type of forum where minor violations can be dealt with quickly. I want to make it clear that for those complaints and violations where the consequences can be severe, where penalties can be more than $10,000, LB 122 keeps the enforcement mechanism the same. Only the Attorney General can prosecute those types of violations in district court, just as they do currently. With the other changes LB 122 proposes, it makes sense to have the Attorney General keep the responsibility to handle those kinds of cases. Again, the goal of all of this would be to speed up enforcement and free the Attorney General's office to focus on the most serious matters. With that, I'm looking forward to the testimony on the bill, this bill, and if there are concerns, we'll be happy to see if we can correct some of those things or all of those things. And I know that there are several testifiers behind me that have much more experience with this system than I do. I would be happy to attempt to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Bostelman. So as it is right now, these all go to the Attorney General.
Correct.
They're all under the Attorney General's
All
review.
goes to the Attorney
Okay.
General.
That's what I thought. We've had a few hearings on this. So this is just the small claims have you worked with the fire marshals on this? Are we going to hear from them
I
in
believe that-
support?
I believe the fire marshal will have some comments to that, and the fiscal note addresses that as well.
Okay, okay. All right, thank you. I'm interested in hearing from people. Thanks.
Any other questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Decay.
Thank you, Chairman, guys. Senator Bostelman, with this committee, who will that be made up of, and who, is that through the fire marshal's office, and who are the people on, how big a committee is it, and how many, who are they, what's their capacities there?
So composition of the committee, I'll let those behind me speak to that. But I believe it's
Okay.
your operators, your diggers, and then the fire marshal have, they have a fiscal note here for 2 additional personnel people to do that.
That'll work. Thank you.
Yes, Senator Frederickson.
Thank you, Chair Geist. I had a question just to clarify, Senator Bostelman, you mentioned up to 2 to 3 years for some of these complaints to be investigated, which is concerning. And also you said minor first-time offenses aren't addressed at all. So is that 2 to 3 year period, is that for these bigger issues? It takes that long for those to be addressed?
So it does both. So some of the big issues don't get, for 2 to 3 years, and some smaller issues, perhaps not at all. So again, I think those behind me will talk more about that.
Sure.
But this has been an issue that we've dealt with in this committee probably, I know for the 6 years we've been here. And I think this bill, as we have it now, we'll be able to hear the testimony from those behind us. And it'll be interesting to see that testimony. But I think this is probably the closest opportunity we have to try to put something in place that may not be perfect, but to get it started and make adjustments for there. But we'll see what those behind us. Because right now, the Attorney General's office does the investigation, then does prosecution. And that's difficult for them to do that. So this is an attempt, once again, to try to find a process in place for our minor complaints to be handled, and then the more serious one to go to the Attorney General that's already been investigated by someone other than the Attorney General.
I had just one follow-up question as well. You mentioned up to, if I understood correctly, up to $10,000 in fines for these. How does that compare to the current structure for fines?
The current ones that are out there?
Yeah.
I'll have to defer that to someone who's following. Sure.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? You staying for closing?
Yes.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay. Are there any proponents for LB 122? Good morning.
Good morning, Chairwoman Geist and fellow members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. I'm Brad Wagner. I'm an owner of Midlands Contracting in Kearney. And today I'm here to represent 110 members of the National Utility Contractors Association of Nebraska. We are the excavators when it comes to the one-call law. I'm currently the chairman of our one-call committee and have been a past president of our chapter. Our members build the sewer, water main, put in the broadband for you and your constituents across the state. So we deal with the system every day. I'm here to ask for your support for LB 122 as we try to improve the enforcement system and the law overall. I'm going to reiterate a little bit of what Senator Bostelman said about safety. That's the number one goal of one call: safety for our employees and the public when we have to dig, but also safety for the facility owners, the utilities. They need safety that their stuff's going to be where it was originally put. We're not going to damage it. And that safety goes on to your constituents. They have a safe, warm house. They have 911 service when they need it. They have water and sewer service, and businesses aren't interrupted because of loss of internet. So we've got to keep fighting to keep that safety. Right now, there's 2 problems. One is our contractor members don't trust the system. Every day, they're dealing with locates not being done on time, and also being done incorrectly. So they don't expect things to be done right. They've lost trust completely. So that's one issue. The other issue is they don't trust the enforcement system. So as has already been said, it takes 2, 3, 4 years to get a one-call complaint heard. My company currently has 3 complaints that are 3 and 4 years old. And I don't file complaints anymore. It's a waste of my time. I pretty much do the investigation to protect myself from the insurance side. But running it into the system, into the one-call system enforcement is futile. So how do we fix the system? Obviously, we got to start with enforcement, and that's what LB 122 will do. We have to create a timely and efficient and fair manner to get the one-call violations looked at, taken care of, and violators, of all kinds, not just one side or the other, but all stakeholders, all users of the system need to be held accountable. That'll take care of the problem with the case not getting done on time. We've got to get people to understand that there's repercussions, and right now there are none. So it's a Wild West out there. One thing I want to hammer home is the hidden cost of what happens when the locate system doesn't work. We've created this system back in '94. Contractors rely on it now to get locates done quickly so they can start their jobs on time and get them done. When this doesn't happen, that cost of delay, that cost of me having to go out and do extra digging to make sure the locates are right, gets into my productivity rates. It gets into my hourly rates. When I bid the next job and I use those rates from the past jobs, my price has gone up. So the constituents, your taxpayers of Nebraska, are paying a premium because the system's not working. I've had to buy equipment to vacuum excavate utilities to make sure they're where they say they are. I have 3 vacuum excavators. I didn't own those 3 vacuum excavators about 7 or 8 years ago. So I have to have that equipment to protect myself. Again, that's in my hourly rate. So don't underestimate what that hidden cost is when the system doesn't work. We rely on it. We expect it to work, and it's not. So we have to come up with other ways to get the job done. Because the owners of our projects don't care if we're having that problem. They simply have a date to get done. So with that, I ask if you have any questions on the system, on what this bill has in it, feel free.
Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Mosher.
So your 3 cases that you have pending, are they cases you brought against somebody else, or is it someone else questioning work that you did?
No, it's my cases brought against facility owners.
So, and it's against the owner of the property, the city, or whoever it is?
No,
or
it's against the utility owner. They did not mark their utility correctly. I hit it and had a delay, but mainly it's the violation of the law. I'm not going for the cost of the delay. What I'm saying is they did not mark their utilities correctly and follow the law. So that's a violation of the one-call law. That's really all the Attorney
Well,
General
now
has.
the law requires you to be within 18 inches or something like that?
Right. They got to be within 18 inches. Yes.
That's left or
Either
right?
side. Either
Yeah.
side of the edge of the utility.
Yes. And how do they indicate the depth of them?
They do not. They're not responsible in the law for depth. That's,
So in your cases, you're saying that they missed it by 3 feet?
in a couple of my cases, they didn't mark it at all.
They never showed up to market?
No, they showed up. They just did not know that it was there. It wasn't, the excuses run the gamut. It wasn't on my maps. I don't know why we missed it, but in a couple cases, yes, they flat did not put a mark on the ground, and we dug and hit the line.
And so then you had to repair what you hit? And
No, I did not. They did.
You hit the utilities
Yes,
line and they fixed it?
right.
They didn't bill you then?
They tried. In a case or two, they've tried.
So they dispute the fact that it wasn't marked right, or?
Yes, yes. So one instance, they told me they sent me a bill, and I said, I have all the documentation, I have video, I have witnesses that this wasn't marked. And the comment was, well, our insurance company will just have to fight it out with your insurance company. And that's what happened.
And how is the bill going to settle those kind of disagreements?
Well, the bill isn't going to settle the cost side and the insurance side. The bill is going to settle the fact that they didn't mark it correctly and they violated the law. How that works into our insurance company going back and saying, look, we have a claim that was filed with the one-call hit court, and you lost that. So now don't try to bill us for it. That's the only way I can see it working through. But this isn't going to directly try to transfer that cost of repair on the contractor or away from the contractor, any of that. This is strictly to say, if you violate the law, we're going to hold you accountable for violating the law.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Senator
Go
Kay.
With this, are there sometimes third-party locating companies out there that are doing marking for the utility companies?
Yes, that's a common thing that a handful of the utilities use a third-party locator to do their locating, and that's a subcontract agreement between the utility and that third-party locator.
This might be a question for somebody, another testifier, but with those third-party contractors, does the responsibility then lie with them rather than the utility companies, or does it go back to the parent?
According to the law, it strictly is with the facility owner, it does not transfer to the third-party locator. So whoever the facility owner wants to use, whether it's their own people or anyone, that's their business. But it all comes down to the utility owners are responsible to get it marked in whatever way they decide to, their most economical way.
Thank you.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Mr. Kramer. It's nice to see Kramer. I have the director's name in my
I
mind.
understand.
Sorry. Wergner. So I kind of have a complex question, I think. So currently this authority is with the Attorney General's office.
Right.
But you have cases pending with them over multiple years.
Right.
And this bill seeks to create a committee. I'm not sure how they would have the same authority as the Attorney General to seek legal action on your behalf.
Well, it'd be through the state fire marshal's legal.
Okay. So if not trying to change Senator Bostelman's bill, but if we took the resources that we're putting in this and forced the Attorney General to hire a team to handle these smaller claims, would that be the result that you're looking for?
Oh, it would be a result, but the problem is, you still don't have investigators versus judge. You don't have that investigative part. That's not what the Attorney General does.
Okay.
And so we're trying to use and the other part is the one call out's currently under state fire marshal's jurisdiction. So we're just trying to use their investigative experience, and they already have investigators. So we're just trying to use that. We think that'd be more efficient.
But they don't have enforcement authority. Is that the issue?
No, they do have some. Yeah, they do because of they enforce already the underground laws when it comes to gas and fuel. So this would be.
You said it early on in your testimony that this needs enforcement, which I don't think any of us would disagree with. But what does enforcement look like to you? Is it fines? Is it losing licenses?
No, it'd be to us, and the bill wants to try to say that we want to start with education. So look at, did the person cause this problem because they weren't educated in the law or in what they were expected to do? And then beyond that, if it's a repeat offender or somebody that should have known better, then you look at fines. Again, we're trying to change behavior through education, and then second through penalties.
And are there currently no fines assessed beyond, paying for damages, but there's not any fines assessed in addition to being?
When they do rule on them, they have assessed fines. The Attorney General has assessed fines.
Okay.
It's on the 811 website. They do have Attorney General's reports.
AG can assess fines.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yes, Senator DeBoer.
I'm sorry, I'm coming in a little bit in the middle of a movie because I was in,
You're all right.
in another committee. So what you would like to do is just have sort of a smaller level enforcement mechanism and then still have the larger hits within the Attorney General, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, and that allows these smaller hits to basically get some playtime, is that right?
That's right.
Because otherwise what we have right now is a situation where the lesser damaged or damage producing
Mhm.
hits are not getting followed up on, or not really having an adjudication within the Attorney General's office, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so here's one of my questions for you. Do you know ahead of time if there's going to be a small amount of damages or a large amount of damages when you're sort of marking or when you accidentally hit something? Is that something you could predict?
Well, predict it, no, but at the time you hit it,
Yes,
you'll
then.
know, yes.
Then you know
Yes.
real quick.
Right. But no, I guess trying to predict it, what are you trying to accomplish with predicting it before it happened?
I'm just saying, I think having these small cases get big results, get fines, get some adjudication will help to prevent the big problems from happening as well by sort of generally across the board, making sure that you're not just gambling with, oh, I'll probably not have a big hit this time.
Right, yeah, that's, again, I can't speak for all the contractors out there and people that are digging of what kind of chances they're willing to take. I mean, I will tell you that right now with the system not working as efficiently as it should, people are taking chances, because if you don't mark our utilities within 2 days, the law says we can start digging. Now, it's got some gray area in whether we're responsible for what happens or not. But at the same time, that's when contractors have to go out and start doing some exploratory digging. For us, we might start vacuum excavating in areas that we wouldn't have to if they just marked them, but we just go out and make sure something's not right in our way, and we're spending that time. So other contractors may just say, what the heck, I'm going to go for it. And if I hit something, I'm going to have some legal recourse saying you didn't show up for 2 days like you're supposed to. So that's the Wild West that's happening out there. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
No, that really does.
Okay.
So what we're trying to, in general, writ large, prevent is the Wild West of, well, they didn't mark it when they were supposed to. I don't have this marked now, so I'm just either going to take my chances or I'm going to be inefficient and do that exploratory digging.
Right, that's where we're at.
Thank you. That clears that up for me.
Yes, Senator. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Geis. Just a quick follow-up on a couple of questions. When you request a locate, how many days do the locators have to come to mark those lines? And how many days after they're marked do you have to be able to do your digging?
Right, so the law says that the day that I request a locate, starting at midnight, they have 2 days. So if I call in today, they would have 2 days from now. So it'd be Thursday, through the day Thursday to mark. At that point, the ticket is alive for 17 days. And what that does is that gives us 2 weeks that we can use it, and then we need to refresh on that 14th day to have a live ticket on the 17th day. That's kind of the math they tried to set up with that. So if we need to refresh because we lost the marks due to weather, somebody came in and graded the area and took the marks out, whatever might happen, or they just wear out in the sun, traffic runs them over, whatever, we can then refresh it day 14 to get them ready again.
That's what I was going to ask about. If you have 14 days to refresh, there could be a lot of natural things that could happen to the markings, whether it's the neon paint or flags or whatever.
Right.
That does happen. So, but one more question, if I may. When it comes to the costs, is there different utilities where if there is a hit that, like in case of fiber versus water versus gas lines, which ones are potentially the most expensive to?
Well, electric and gas is the ones we're scared to death of because of the danger.
Yeah.
But all of them, I mean, people rely on fiber on their internet. Hospitals have been taken out by fiber hits. So right now, my guys obviously have fear of gas and electric because of their inherent danger to them. But from a company standpoint, I mean, we treat them all the same. There's no good utility hit. Our goal in our company is zero. And unfortunately, zero that are our mistake. We give our guys a little leeway when they did everything they could and they accidentally catch something. But I hope that answers your question.
And how often do those hits occur on a project? I visited your facility in Kearney on a project like that street system you was working on.
Right.
How often does a hit occur on
I would say there's probably hit on every other project, but again, our projects are lasting 3 to 8 weeks. I mean, the project you were on in Kearney, we had hit that utility that the owners didn't realize that it went underground where it went underground. They didn't mark it. So we had an example there of just, it wasn't on the maps for whatever reason. So, but the bigger thing that we run into is the near misses. We have near misses every week. And, there's things out there we can do to see the utilities are on the street. If we're in a small town and we're digging down the street, we can go look for the pedestals. You've seen telephone pedestals sitting in the corners or at the ends of the blocks. I mean, we can see where the electrical comes down off the pole and what building it might go to. You know, typically electricians don't run things all over the place. It's all straight line. So we can have that. We have to spend that time surveying the area to make sure that things aren't missed. And that's one of the steps we take now, is because, you know, we used to trust the locates more, but now we really spend some time surveying and looking around. But those near misses are the ones that drive my guys crazy. Because, you know, they call me up and they say, I almost hit electrical secondary line, you know, that wasn't marked. And then we have to just figure out if it was really the public powers issue or if it was the owner's issue to mark. You know, there's all those kind of things that enter in. So, but the other part you got to remember is a lot of utilities have flags over top of them. We put marking tape, warning tape over top of them. So we'll hit that a lot of times before. So my guys are always looking for marking tape. Yellow if it's gas, red if it's power, orange if it's telecom. And so we have a lot of that. So we save the day. You know, I told the guys, your job is to save the day. You know, you're out there trying not to hit things. You can't use the one call violations as an excuse. That's my company. And that's what we try with NUCA members to say is we're still trying to be professional excavators and do the right things to work around the system problems. But again, this is adding to our costs. And I don't think that's understood enough out there in the world of the cost that it's added to what we do.
Yes, Senator Mosher.
When you said they didn't mark the utility, they forgot to, or they never showed up, or they came out and marked some things and not all?
They came out in the case in Grand Island, we directional drilled, you know, without digging, we ran a directional drill under the street. And as we pulled back, we caught a telecommunications cable and they never marked it. Now, the other marks had been done for other cables, but in that specific area, they had forgot that they ran a fiber through there a few years ago. And so it just didn't get marked.
So somebody didn't get it put on a map somewhere, so they didn't?
I never got an answer, to be honest with you, but I mean, either it didn't get on the map or the locator didn't see it. And I don't have an explanation. I don't have a good answer for you on that.
That's something that has to be determined by the investigation.
Right. And again, you're trying to change behavior by holding them accountable for that if they broke the law, whether that's through education or through a fine.
Well, I would hesitate to accentuate breaking the law. I think everybody's trying to dig their lines in and not hit things. And I think the utilities would rather that you didn't hit their stuff.
Sure.
You know, and to say, you know, oh, they broke the law. Well, we're all digging in the same space trying to connect things, and we need to work together to get those things figured out.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. So when you file with your insurance company, do they also have to do an investigation?
Yes, depending on the size of the claim,
Okay.
there's usually their safety person will be coming and looking at the evidence either I have, and I, you know, again, it depends on how much effort I put in and what I can
Sure.
provide them. A lot of it's provided by me in my specific case, but if not, I know that their safety person would come out and see what the details are of the damage. Yes.
So in situations where you're filing with an insurance company and you're filing with the one call, do they ever collaborate? Or are they just two totally separate?
Yeah, they do not collaborate because again, the one call system, we're trying to say the law was violated.
Mhm.
But now what happens is that same package of information I give to the one call complaint, to the attorney general in this case, I give to my insurance company. It's the same,
Okay.
you know, typically a video of what we've got is the main witness in all of this.
Okay.
So, but yes, they do not collaborate.
Okay. I was just curious how that works.
Two separate issues.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? I don't see any. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Any other proponents for LB 122?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Brent Smoyer, Brent Smoyer, and I'm here to testify in support of LB 122 on behalf of Northwestern Energy. Northwestern is a natural gas company serving Alda, Grand Island, Kearney, and North Platte. Given the number of questions that came before me, I will keep my testimony exceedingly brief. Northwestern supports improving and streamlining the process for adjudicating complaints for One Call Act Diggers Hotline 811. This process was, of course, clearly explained before me in the extensive testimony, and the question was excellent. We trust the legislature can and will establish an efficient, fair process, and an adjudicative body will be balanced between excavators and operators. We believe that LB 122 is an excellent start, especially as it builds on the committee's previous work on this matter last year. We'd be glad to engage in discussions to accomplish Senator Bostelman's goals and objectives. As we know, there will likely be changes to this bill, and of course, the number of, I assume, neutral testifiers behind me will certainly have discussions about that. We're happy to be a part of the overall solution, regardless of how it ends up, and are happy to inspire further solutions based on LB 122. With that, I'll conclude my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Smoyer. Any questions from the committee? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other proponents? Seeing none, how about opponents? Are there any opponents to 122?
Morning, Chairman Geist and
Yes.
members of the committee. My name is John Buckley, JOHNBUCKLEY. I'm Director of Work Management at Omaha Public Power District, and I'm testifying on behalf of OPPD. I'm also testifying on behalf of the Nebraska Power Association, NPA. The NPA is a voluntary association representing all Nebraska's approximately 165 consumer-owned public power systems. Thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony to the Transportation Telecommunications Committee on this important legislation. I want to express OPPD's opposition to LB 122, a bill change to the provisions of the One Call System Act. OPPD is both excavator and an operator with regards to this bill. And I just want to point out, whenever somebody digs and hits one of OPPD's facilities, our claims department has a team that goes out immediately. We have systems set up with the One Call that we get immediate notification. We're out there right on site. We interview, we investigate, and we come to a decision on whether the excavator was at fault or we were at fault for not properly locating our facilities. So those go both ways. Sometimes we have a miss, sometimes the excavator has a miss, but those are clearly identified and rectified, and we seldom have any follow-up on those. The decisions are mutually agreed upon between the excavator and OPPD. We've been reviewing the One Call bills for a number of legislative sessions. I believe we are getting closer to a compromise on this, but some concerns still remain. For example, the cost of implementing this bill will more than likely be recovered possibly by a ticket charge paid by utility members. Creating a third party to help solve claims would create potentially additional settlement costs. Other issues as we've reviewed this have come up is the makeup of the committee. We would like to explore alternates to the Underground Excavation Safety Committee to prevent potential conflicts of interest. Also looking at increasing the number of members on the safety committee to maybe prevent some of those conflict of interests. Also at issue for us is with the One Call system is excessive refresh tickets by excavators, including multiple refresh tickets requested before an excavation is initiated. So we're working on these. We're going to work on these with other stakeholders and your committee. Hopefully get a resolution so we can move to neutral on this bill at a minimum. So with that, I just a couple of kind of statistics I'd like to throw out there from operation of the system. So for 2022, 99% of all tickets were located correctly based on status reported back to the Nebraska One Call system. So that's our call center that records all activity and tickets. And so incorrect ticket locates where excavators called in and said the marks were not correct represented 1% of all tickets last year. Also, I think we talked about this, but the tolerance zone, state statutes allows that plus or minus within 18 inches, plus or minus half the width of the facility. So just wanted to highlight that, as an operator of a facility, locating is part art, part smart science. And so that tolerance zone is in there to reflect the fact that, you're not going to get exactly on that line every time. And as a excavator that OPPD is also, I'd like to point out, in Title 152, Chapter 2, there's provisions for hand digging within that 18 inches plus half the width of that facility. So excavators and whirlwinds too, where you take care as you're in that tolerance zone, get to hand digging, not mechanical digging when you approach the location of that facility to provide, extra caution there to prevent those damages. Just on refresh tickets, in Nebraska last year, 18% of all tickets were refresh tickets. And for OPPD, for the tickets we had to locate for excavators, 24% of our tickets were refresh tickets. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes those tickets are refreshed multiple times without any excavation beginning. So when to refresh a ticket, the marks are gone, weather, you heard that testimony earlier. But also statute as far as when notification is required for excavators, it's between 2 and 10 business days before commencing that excavation. So excavators are supposed to call in 2 days and initiate that excavation within that 10-day period. And then that ticket life is 17 days. But we're seeing a big problem with people kind of using the ticket system as a appointment system, right? They put tickets in and then might get to that ticket eventually. So I would thank you in advance for considering our position at this point, and just wanted to clarify that we are open to additional discussion and talk on the bill. With that, any questions?
Yes, Senator Bostelman. I'm sorry, Mosier.
I'd take that as a compliment.
You should, that's sorry.
Yeah. So you don't get paid for the first ticket or subsequent refreshes?
So we pay, so OPPD pays to the one-call system for that ticket to be recorded, and then we pay for that ticket to be relocated again. So
But the contractor doesn't have to pay anything.
it's free to the excavator, so the excavator can call in as many tickets as they want. The idea for it to be free is we don't want cost to prevent or prohibit.
Yeah, if
somebody
it's
from-
$200 charge, maybe he's gonna start digging, and then you hit something and you got a $5,000 damage.
Right, so there's no charge for an excavator. The facility owners bear the cost of the one-call system on a per-ticket price, and then facility owners have the cost to locate the facilities for the tickets that are called in.
So charging for subsequent refreshes, probably still not a good idea because they might let it slip and.
Yeah, I don't think we should have any barriers to excavators calling in a ticket and charging them for extra refreshes. They get behind or they forget, next thing you know, they're out. And
Yeah, if they're not sure, it's better to look again before you crash into something.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yes, Senator DeVore.
Thank you, Senator Geist. That sounds like a kind of a separate problem. The problem of multiple refreshes sounds like a kind of a separate problem than the one that's being addressed by the one call system, and trying to figure out, like, the four corners of this bill doesn't seem to address, but you can help me understand how it does.
Yeah, so one calls a multi-layered onion, I would say. And so one of the concerns in the excavator community, and it was mentioned earlier, was the timeliness of locate tickets. So we've got 2 business days to locate as a facility owner and operator. So if, in my case, if I'm chasing 24% of tickets that are refreshed, and maybe they haven't been dug on, and maybe they're just being refreshed, and no work is going, that diverts my resources from getting new tickets. And so that kind of spirals out of control where, we're out marking tickets that already have paint flags in the ground where we could be marking new tickets. And so it's a challenge from a resource perspective to keep on time throughout the year.
And that's actually, I don't know that we've really talked a lot about that aspect of that in our one call hearings over the last couple of years when I've been on this committee. So what would you suggest? Because obviously we don't want to penalize anyone for saying, hey, come help us out. Let's make sure we got the right spot. So how would you suggest limiting the number of refreshes that we have?
Yeah, so, it's a behavior piece, right? So, whether a fine would be appropriate or not, I'm not sure. Maybe it's education, maybe it's, reaching out. We do track, by excavator, how many late tickets or how many refreshes they have per ticket, right? So we have done, OPVD has done some outreach on a few excavators in the Omaha area to say, hey, you guys are really refreshing a lot of tickets. Can we help you out here if you need some education? So, I'm always on the education side versus the carrot versus the stick. Can we educate the impact of these refresh tickets on the system and the ability for owners to locate in a timely manner?
Well, that's something that, being a teacher, I'm also into the education side of things too. But so your objection to what we have here with the Bostelman bill is primarily you don't like the makeup of the committee.
Yes.
Am I understanding that? And any other specific things that would sort of get you to yes?
I think, having a bit better understanding of how the Attorney General's office is going to interact with that and, kind of the ability of that large and small and how that would work. And, I brought up the refresh idea, or the refresh concern, just to give the committee a perspective on some of the other impacts there are to the successful operation of the one call system.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Senator Decay.
Thank you, Chairman Geist. Talking about the refresh and the initial locate, you have 48 hours or 2 days to locate. If that's not located within that time period, is there a fine levied or how's that work if the locators aren't there within that 48 hours? And I guess to go off of that, so that the refresh part of it, is there any fines levied if they don't conduct a work in a 14-day time period that they have, or how's that leveraged out so that everybody is accountable for where they at on the initial locate and on the refresh part of it too?
Yeah, so today, if a facility owner operator does not locate their ticket within the 2-day period, so basically it's if I called a ticket in today, I've got 24 hours on Wednesday and 24 hours on Thursday, so it'd be 12:01 on Friday that ticket is good, right? So from a complaint perspective, there are complaints in the Attorney General's office, both for facility operators that haven't located their tickets on time. And so those have been complaints that still, I think facility or operators have not. That's the issue I would like to see enforcement on those habitual late ticket facilities. From a standpoint of refreshes, we've just started, at least I've started from my perspective, started gathering data. Haven't really filed a complaint against an excavator for excessive refresh, just trying to get a picture of what that looks like at this point. Does that help?
Yeah. That, when it comes to when I'm asking about fines or anything, on all these projects, time is money, and refreshes, the operators or the excavators want to get it done in a timely manner because they're under constraints of a time frame to do that. The initial locate, if it's not located within the first 48 hours, there's probably a time constraint, a little more pressure put on the excavators to start digging. So to offset any potential extra expenditures, I was just curious how those were handled so that who's ever responsible for bearing the brunt, regardless if it's in the initial locate or if it's in the refresh process, who's responsible for bearing the brunt of those expenditures due to time.
Yeah, so from OPVD as an excavator's perspective, the biggest impact for us is on our customers. So a lot of work is, their cable faults to their house, cable faults in their neighborhood. But more often than not, it's like backyard cable faults, and we're waiting on telecom to come locate. So We call it a ticket, 2 days pass, 5 days pass, 14 days pass, and we still haven't got a locate on that. So the cost is, the customer has a piece of cable that's faulted out, we've got a temporary fix, and they're waiting for us to come back. And so, from our constructor's perspective, it's more of the impact on our customer, and then also my team balances all the work, we schedule all the work, and it just makes it a lot harder to juggle because you're waiting for facility owners to locate their tickets.
Thank you.
The other cost is on refreshes. If we go 5 or 6 times and just put paint on paint, that's costing me 5 times as much as it should have cost. If it's 5 refreshes, if it's 6, for example.
Thank you. Any additional questions from the committee? I don't see any. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there any other opponents? Any opponents? How about those who wish to testify in the neutral capacity? Good morning.
Good morning. Chairman Geist and members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Jill Becker, Jillbecker, and I'm a registered lobbyist for Black Hills Energy. I'm appearing before you today in a neutral capacity on LB 122, and as several people have noted, this committee has considered numerous one-call bills since the inception of the One-Call Notification System Act in 1994. So we've had plenty of time to think about things like this, but things have certainly changed over that amount of time. Senator Bostelman began his comments with the intent of the act, and I would emphasize one portion of it. It is to prevent injury to persons and damage to property. And we can always pay for the damage to property. We can't undo when injuries to people are caused. So from our perspective, any changes of the One Call Act should be viewed through the lens of that intent. Does it increase the opportunity for notice and safety? Does it prevent injury to people and to damage? Sometimes what that means is that excavations can't happen as fast as people would like because we have to get those locates done. Over the 29 years or so that the One Call Act has been in effect, the sheer number of locates has increased exponentially. This will increase even more with the further deployment of broadband. And so as this committee considers all of our broadband legislation, please know that that deployment is going to have a very significant impact on utilities. A few comments regarding LB 122 specifically. Black Hills Energy is open to the creation of a safety committee, or what is sometimes referred to as a hit court. I would recommend some potential changes. First, removing the state fire marshal from the board. It would seem to be a conflict of interest to have the state fire marshal investigating the complaints and then serving on the board, if I read the bill correctly, and then determining whether to take action and fine someone. Secondly, if the intent is to provide a swift and effective determination of complaints, I would recommend that the board should meet monthly. The board should also the bill should be clarified to ensure that the $10,000 penalty limitation applies to a single incident or to multiple incidents, and just to make sure that that aligns with the current statute regarding penalties. One of the questions that we have had over several years is whether the Attorney General has sufficient resources to handle the anticipated caseload of one-call cases. And I think it's fair to say that we really don't know what that caseload would be if people assumed that it was a process that worked. Is the time and effort of an investigation worth it? That is always going to be something that the AG has to weigh, and potentially with, as Senator Bostelman described, a small claims type of situation, perhaps the safety committee could look at every complaint brought before it. It could identify the potential habitual violators early on, even if the damages were small. Other things for this committee to consider, just based on the conversation that we've had over the other testifiers, limiting how many locates could be called in, limiting the amount potentially to reasonably excavated within the validity period of the markings. That is a huge issue for us. There is no limit on what somebody could actually call in as a locate. If somebody called in the entire city of Lincoln for us to do locates, we would have 48 hours to do it. And there's nothing to really allow us to say to somebody, we actually can't do that. We would encourage the committee to look at making the board a little bit larger, in part due to potential conflicts of interest, but also to make sure that they have a quorum that they can take action. We encourage the committee to consider violations for failing to locate a ticket even after it is late. We also need to recognize that the ability of a city to impact actions like this through the permitting process could also be part of the discussion. That's pretty much all my comments. Given the range of comments that you've heard today, I'm sure that you have questions. I hope that the committee will strongly consider some of the recommendations to improve the bill, and I'd be happy to continue working with other interested parties to work on this piece of legislation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Frederickson.
Thank you for being here. You outlined a number of different potential suggestions for the bill to improve it. I'm curious, have you had the opportunity to share these with Senator Bostelman's office?
I did talk with Senator Bostelman. None of them are in writing,
Okay.
but Senator Bostelman and I did speak yesterday, and we knew that there'd be several ideas today.
Okay, all right. I just want to confirm that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Is it common for you to get a request to do a large number of locates by a company? For instance, you said you would have to have 48 hours for a whole city. Is a large area request common?
I would not say it is common, but I will say that when we had a large fiber project start in Lincoln, those requests were huge. And if you think about Nebraska weather, our locating cycles generally, depending on the weather, March, April, heavy into maybe October, right? That's your construction season. We definitely had to increase our staffing and work as best as we could with that project. But ultimately, we ended up hiring more people, dedicating a person to that project, really increasing the workload of our people and the number of them on that project because the law said we had 48 hours. And despite efforts to, work with that company, the law says 48 hours.
Yeah. Do you get forewarning from companies about a project coming, or is there a planning period so that you know what you have to staff up for?
Yeah, realistically, no. We would love that. Some states do require something like that. If a project falls within certain parameters, there is a required planning period. In most cases, the answer is no. And it's kind of a matter of scope. A big project in a small town could, we might only have one person in that town.
Right.
That would be enough to max out our resources. So, but as much as we can, if we hear about those projects, we certainly try to reach out. I think John said a lot of this is about behavior and relationships. And all of you can legislate all you want. It's up to us also to make that legislation work. And part of that isn't legislation. It is in part relationships and having that willingness of both parties, because we are both an excavator and operator, to make the system work. Frankly, I'm terrified of what fiber projects could mean for us, in the sense of hitting a gas line is incredibly dangerous. You don't get to decide what the results are. They could be devastating.
Yeah.
And we want to do everything that we can to ensure the safety of everyone. So as we have millions of dollars deploying broadband for wonderful reasons across our state, third-party damage is the number one risk. That risk has increased.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you so much.
Any other neutral testimony? Good morning.
Morning. Chairwoman Geist, and members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Ken Yoho, Kenyoho, and I am here on behalf of the Nebraska Attorney General to speak in a neutral capacity on LB 122. I am an Assistant Attorney General in the Attorney General's Legal Services Bureau. The One Call Act provides primary enforcement obligations to the Attorney General's office, and my responsibilities include enforcement of that act. If passed into law, LB 122 would transfer the bulk of the Attorney General's enforcement authority for one-call violations from our office. My testimony today is intended to provide the committee insight into the current enforcement process and the bill's changes to that process. There are two primary ways the Attorney General's office receives complaints for one-call violations. Most investigations begin with a complaint filed directly with our office via mail. The bulk of these complaints are against an operator for mismarking or failing to mark utilities within the required time frame, or an excavator digging prematurely or failing to file a dig ticket at all. The other sorts of complaints are referrals from the Fire Marshal's office. These are related to incidences involving gas facilities and account for about 1/4 to 1/3 of all received complaints. Overall, my office usually fields about 40 to 60 complaints each year from the thousands of reportable violations that occur. After receiving a complaint, the Attorney General's office becomes solely responsible for investigating, enforcing, and resolving those complaints. For investigation, we either review the reports from the Fire Marshal's office in the case of damages to gas facilities, or we reach out to the parties for supporting and mitigating evidence. After investigation, a decision as to how to proceed is made, which depends on the nature of the violation and the factors laid out in the One Call Act. Many complaints against excavators are resolved either with an informational or warning letter, as they often involve first-time offenders or a respectable history of compliance with the Act. And where a letter is insufficient, such as in cases involving damage or repeat offenses, the Attorney General's office will usually extend settlement terms to cooperating excavators and operators who acknowledge those violations. Through the settlement agreement, we collect a civil penalty and close the complaint. In these cases, the typical timeline from start to finish might run 2 to 5 months. And again, that's with cooperating parties. When this fails, going to court becomes the only option. The current process outlined in the One Call Act is an outlier in terms of how administrative violations are typically handled in the state. In contexts other than one call, investigation and enforcement occurs at the agency level, for example, at the Department of Banking or the Department of Health and Human Services, and is subject to appellate review under the Administrative Procedures Act, or APA. In contrast, the One Call Act places that burden outside the agency responsible for regulating the conduct and places it on the Attorney General's office. It also requires the Attorney General's office to bring the enforcement action in court rather than an action proceeding before an agency in the first instance. The existing process is a departure from the typical administrative procedure used in most contexts. LB 122 changes the one-call complaint process to conform more closely to administrative enforcement processes used by other state agencies, with the distinction that the Attorney General will continue to bring actions for violations that exceed $10,000. LB 122 has a second impact on the current system, which is an impact on the cost-benefit analysis of filing a suit. As a historical matter, the Attorney General does face, at times, uncooperative parties. If a party is unwilling to work with our office as part of a settlement, then the Attorney General has only one additional option, and that's to bring a civil action for the violation in the appropriate court. Filing a court action is a resource-intensive process which takes time, and even for minimal damages claims, for instance, a claim in Arthur County for $100 in damages, presents a difficult cost-benefit analysis, especially when there are significant volume of claims that involve small damage, that fall in that small damage range. Under the process proposed by LB 122, this analysis would shift in favor of bringing enforcement in all claims. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Takei.
Thank you, Chairman Geist. Paragraph 4, you said after receiving the complaint, you investigate it either through review or report, or you reach out to the parties involved. Do you have anybody that is a field person that goes out to the job sites and see firsthand what possibly could have taken place?
We do not. Usually, our goal is to collect that information from the parties involved. And part of what we've done in the past, during past education sessions, or whenever we have the chance to talk with the excavators, is to encourage them to get that evidence as they're preparing to make a claim, take pictures, so that we have something to work with. Our complaints range from just a simple description, here's the ticket, they failed to mark it, to here's pictures, here's video, here's everything that happened, here's a history. So it varies on the parties involved, but no one from our office goes out to investigate unless it involves gas facilities, at which point the state fire marshal addresses it.
Yes, Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you. On the back page of your testimony, you said for minimal claims, your only option, if people aren't cooperating, is to take them to civil suit, correct? Or for any claims, I suppose that would be.
Correct. For any enforcement action under the Act, the only formal method that we can pursue that is in court.
So under this legislation, would that be an option available to the fire marshal or this committee, the committee that it would be forming, that they could seek civil action?
So it would transition, as far as I understand it, it would transition the action to the agency level. So they would conduct their hearings, their process, and at which point it'd be subject to the APA. And if they didn't like the opinion that came out at that hearing, then they could appeal it according to the Administrative Procedures Act.
They'd be, I'm sorry, what was the last part of that?
But they could appeal it according to the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act. And so basically that's filing with the district court and having them review the record de novo.
So does this give them more avenues for resolution or the same avenues for resolution?
A different avenue, I would say.
A different avenue.
As in, it would replace the current avenue where I have to bring an action to court to whoever's responsible for bringing that enforcement under this bill would be bringing the action to the committee formed by this bill.
And then if they were uncooperative to the committee, then they'd have to take them to court.
Well, the committee would still have to have their, make their decision, their
Right.
findings, and then that hearing would be their opportunity to challenge those findings. But they could appeal it to the district court, and the district court would be looking at the record formed by the agency.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Senator DeBoer.
Thank you, Senator Geis. So, full disclosure, I didn't take administrative law in law school, and it was misprinted on our Barbary book that it was even going to be there. It wasn't on the list. I found out it was going to be on the bar exam 2 days before and spent 2 days studying everything you could possibly want to know about administrative law, which is to say my remembrance of that is a little bit cloudy. So the way in which this works in other administrative capacities is that if there's a complaint, then there will have an administrative proceeding, which is a quasi-judicial proceeding. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then, because I don't remember what happens in the APA, so you have some sort of resolution, regardless of whether or not the parties agree to the resolution. It's like a quasi-judicial proceeding in which they are a party, whether they want to be or not. And then once that is decided, then that's an appealable action which can go into the district court. Is that how it works?
Yes, typically.
Okay. And so then from that point, if there was some sort of appeal made of these small incidents, they would go through the district court process. But typically in other APA instances, in other committees, other departments, how often are those administrative proceedings, how often do they tend to be brought in the district court?
I would say it varies dramatically by the agency.
Sure.
Some more than others, certainly. But oftentimes the agency has, after a certain point, established a certain level of authority and knowledge in their field that they're going to be making recommendations that the court would ultimately agree with. And so, except in the rare instances where there's a weird issue that pops up, I would say most parties would probably recognize when they can and cannot what the arguments they might make above. I don't know if that quite answered the question.
No, it
but
did.
It's hard to say in this
Yeah.
case.
So when there would be questions, because there are some questions some people have brought to me that I think make sense about whether or not in the aggregate for $10,000 in the aggregate refers to per incident or, whatever. Some of those sorts of things can be worked out through administrative rules and regulations and also through proceedings. Is that?
Not so much in proceedings. Clarity on that would be useful, but I don't know. The agency isn't necessarily the one that's interpreting the statutes. So if it were to be challenged at the district court, it'd probably be reviewed fresh there, if that makes sense, regardless of review rules and regulations that occur at the agency level. That isn't to say that it won't be considered. It's just not binding.
So if there's ambiguity in the statute and the agency proceeds with it in a particular direction, the district court could say, it's not that direction, or they could affirm what the agency does in terms of the direction that they interpret something in the statute.
Correct. But of course, rules and regulations are going to be reviewed through our office, and we'll be looking at that when that comes.
To help
For
them
those
out,
sorts
to
of
make sure
issues,
that they,
to see what the most likely interpretation would be and things like that.
okay. All right, thank you for that review for me. It's been a long time.
Yes, Senator Moser.
It would seem to me that the contractor who's digging the hole or boring or, whatever construction they're undertaking is held liable for a lot of things beyond their control. And so I have some appreciation for what they're worried about. But we keep talking about the utility contractor and then the utility, you say it's a phone company or a gas company or whatever, but those two have to work out the problem. What about the owner of the property, the guy that's actually responsible for bringing the construction forward? I mean, say it's a internet provider that they're investing millions in a community. Do they sometimes pay for these just to get the thing solved? Or would there be some reason for us to bring them into it to pay for part of it?
So in terms of violations of the One Call Act, which is strictly my role in this, we're not looking at necessarily the extent of the damages caused by the violation, i.e. How much damage did Black Hills suffer when whatever excavator damaged a pipe. We're looking for
whose fault it is?
Not necessarily whose fault, but whether there was a violation of the act itself, and then looking at the factors defined in the act to determine that violation. And so, for example, which part, was there a failure to mark? In that case, it would fall on the operator, the owner of the utility, or was it the fact that the excavator never filed a dig ticket, and so the utilities were never notified and they never marked because of that, at which point enforcement would go towards the excavator. And then we had to look at the factors lined out within the One Call Act to essentially determine an appropriate assessment.
Is there a minimum amount of claim you can file with the Attorney General on this?
There is no minimum requirement per se, but there is a practical concern in terms of
some of the little ones you just kind of let.
It depends. A lawyer answer there, but if say you have a repeat offender and we're seeing a bunch of issues from the same excavator or operator.
$50, $100 tickets.
Correct. We can bring all those actions if they're in the same court. If they're all in Lancaster County, that makes it easy. We can bring those actions if we need to. But if we have this excavator who's had the one-off issue, but otherwise is compliant, usually we just go with a letter in that case.
So would you rather get rid of this one call stuff? Is it a headache for the Attorney General's office?
I would say that's a matter of policy for the committee here.
It's for somebody else's policy, not yours?
Correct.
So who do we ask? The Attorney General?
I believe the one board would be your
Yeah.
one call board.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? I don't see any. Thank you for your testimony. Any additional neutral testimony? Good morning.
Good morning. I almost said good afternoon, but here we are.
It's hard to switch that, isn't it?
Right, yes. Well, good morning, Chairperson Geist and members of the Telecommunications and Transportation Committee. My name is Doug Hobein, D-O-U-G-H-O-H-B-E-I-N, and I am the interim state fire marshal. I'm here to testify in a neutral capacity on LB 122. The bill will create an underground safety excavation committee, which will have the authority to hear complaints, render decisions, and issue civil penalty amounts of less than $10,000. The role of the State Fire Marshal Agency will expand to include investigative authority for violations of certain one-call laws and Title 155, Chapter 2 regulations for all parties to the system, instead of being limited to violations only related to pipeline facilities. For the State Fire Marshal Agency to fully carry out the requirements of LB 122, the agency needs clarification regarding language within the proposed bill. On page 3, lines 12 to 14, it is stated that, quote, "No member of the committee may sit in hearing upon question in which such member or any business with which such member is associated as a party," unquote. The state fire marshal or his/her designee shall serve on the committee, and every complaint that comes to the committee will have been investigated by the state fire marshal staff members. Clarification is needed to ensure party doesn't include the investigation, so there won't be a conflict in every case brought to the committee. On page 3, lines 19 and 20, it states that, quote, "Notice of investigation," unquote, "shall be given when the agency initiates its own investigation into possible violation of the one-call requirements or after determining a complaint may have merit." There is no clarifying language describing how this notice will be delivered. Other sections of the bill require communication with the parties of the investigations to be given either through personal service or service by certified mail. Clarification is needed to determine what kind of notice is needed to the parties to initiate an investigation and the possible costs associated with those actions. On page 4, lines 18 to 20, it states that, quote, "Not later than 30 days after the date of the committee's written determination, any party may submit a written request for hearing on the matter," unquote. The agency seeks clarification on when the 30 days start to run. Is it on the date a determination is put in writing or from the date the parties receive notice of written determination? Further, the agency needs clarification on whether the request for a hearing will be submitted to the agency or to the committee, which is only required to meet quarterly. If the request for a hearing goes to the agency, a process and time frame for the agency to notify the committee needs to be outlined. On page 4, lines 29 through 31, the bill states the assessed civil penalty shall be paid within 30 days. Later on page 5, lines 23 through 26, it is stated that upon the issuance of a final order, the committee can assess costs of the appeal hearing against the parties. On page 7, lines 4 and 5, it states the civil penalty shall be remitted to the state treasurer, but there is no language detailing how the costs of the appeal shall be collected or remitted. Also, there is no language that addresses what actions are to be taken or by whom if a party refuses to pay the civil penalty. Finally, the bill states that when the agency has reason to believe that any person has committed any violation, notice and an investigation shall be performed, and all complaints and investigations shall be referred to the committee. The agency currently has discretion in determining which investigations are referred to the Attorney General for structured enforcement actions based on the level and nature of violations. Because of this discretion, the agency currently utilizes less formal techniques such as one-on-one person trainings, group education classes, or referrals to the One Call Center for advanced training on ticketing issues. If this discretion is removed and all violations must be referred to the committee, it will dramatically increase the caseload for the committee as well as limit the ability to use violations as learning opportunities. Thank you for your time and attention. I would be happy to attempt to answer any questions you have from the committee.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for being here. Are there any questions from the committee? I do not see any. Thank you very much.
Senator Geist, members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. My name is Tip O'Neill. I represent the Nebraska Telecommunications Association, which is a consortium of representing the majority of companies that provide landline and broadband services in Nebraska.
Tip, would you spell your name?
It's TIPO, apostrophe capital NEILL.
Thank you.
I think we had to remind me last year, first year.
I'll stay on you.
Sorry. You know, we have been in opposition to this bill in the past. And again, this is one that's been around. The members who've been on this committee probably for 6 years remember the interim study hearing that we had in the east chamber of the Capitol, where we used to have hearings while this room was under renovation, and so it's been around a while, and we are concerned basically with three issues, but again, you're never going to have a perfect bill that's going to take care of some of these issues. So we are neutral this year, and we are not opposing. First of all, we opposed the bill last year because the issue of cost went to the ticket. And this year, the cost, as I read the fiscal note, goes to the general fund. So that's a difference, and that probably is one of the reasons we're neutral rather than against. Second, we do agree with Jill Becker, who testified earlier, and some of my members are concerned about the state fire marshal acting as both the investigator and a member of the HIT Corps. So that's an issue I think at least there ought to be some discussion on. And finally, the section that is outright repealed in the bill is the section that requires the report from the Attorney General regarding the number of complaints filed and the number of complaints resolved. We think that was helpful, at least that report shows what progress is being made in terms of how issues are being resolved, and we think that should be maintained. But I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee? I do have one.
Yes.
So I am interested that you're testifying neutral because I remember those past few years. And so in concept, do you like this concept that Senator Bostelman has brought forth better than what has been in the past? Just overall?
Well, I think that the concept is somewhat the same. The issue was who was going to pay for the concept in the past. And when it was going to go to the tickets, that meant the operators were going to pay for it. And now it means the general fund is going to pay for it. So we have less concern now.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that
Sure.
that was the issue. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, Senator Takei.
Thank you, Chairman Geist. Testify in a neutral position as being opposed over the last few years. Maybe this isn't a fair question, but how close are we to having a bill, particularly this bill, that's both beneficial and not detrimental to any of the parties involved?
This is a complex issue. The issue of excavation. You know, you've got the locators who are generally contract with the operators, and you've got a lot of moving parts in terms of who is at fault when there's a problem. And so I think that, and again, we're talking not about the liability of a hit. We're talking about the act that becomes a violation of the law. So it does, you know, if the hit causes $500 million worth of damage, that doesn't mean necessarily that the slight negligence of a locator in missing it by a few inches is going to be a major violation of the One Call Act. And so that's one of the issues. I think for smaller issues or repetitive issues where continuing education would be the best solution, the education would be the best solution, rather than trying to find someone for every act or omission. I think this bill is as good as we're going to get. So.
Any other questions? I don't see any. Thank you
Okay,
for your
thank you.
testimony.
Thank
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Geist and members of the committee. My name is Mike Leffler, spelled M-I-K-E, last name spelled L-O-E-F-F-L-E-R. I am the Senior Director of Certificates and External Affairs for Northern Natural Gas, which is headquartered in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm going to be testifying in a neutral capacity, highlighting one major issue, and that is the advisory committee, and I'll get to that in a second. Northern Natural Gas was founded in 1930. We have about 14,300 miles of pipe extending from the southwest corner of New Mexico all the way up to the upper peninsula of Michigan. Most of those lines are high pressure, large diameter lines, so that we take a very strong interest in one call because that's a protection for those pipelines. We support LB 122 if an amendment was provided that would require all the votes of the committee to be majority vote only and not a super majority. We believe in strong one call laws. They help prevent third-party damage, which is the most common cause of pipeline failure. Any line hit on any of our lines puts at risk not only the excavator, but the first responders, our employees, and the public. It also increases the risk of loss of service to communities. To appreciate the need for a strong one-call enforcement, I want to bring up the situation that happened in Hinton, Iowa, a couple years back. If you go to the back page of your testimony, you'll see a fireball that resulted when a party was doing deep chiseling in a farm near Hinton, Iowa. They did not make a one-call utility locate request. When they hit our high-powered line, there was an explosion and a fire that went several hundred feet in the air. To give you some example of the force of that explosion, they were on a backhoe, which is a large piece of machinery, and it was thrown 200 feet, which is about the distance of a very long field goal. So it was a very strong explosion. Fortunately, no one died. But I will tell you, 2 weeks later, our air patrol, which is one of the things that we use to help enforce one call, found these same two gentlemen in another field doing the same thing without having made a one call. So that's why one call is important, because it serves as a deterrent to people going out there and doing excavation without making a one call. Now, incidentally, these people were eventually fined $25,000 by the Iowa Attorney General. We have worked for harder one-call laws in every state in which we operate. For example, the Nebraska legislature passed a bill at our suggestion that required that anytime you're operating within 25 feet of a high-powered natural gas transmission line, that we have to be there. We made a commitment to the legislature that we would dedicate those resources and we would be there every time that request is made, and we have kept our promise. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that we understand the importance of one call. We really feel that this is a bill that provides an alternative to help to enforce the one call laws, but we want to make sure that in the law, there is a requirement that any advancement of any complaint require only a simple majority. You've heard other issues that have been raised here today. We stand ready to work with any party that wants to make this bill stronger and successful this session. With that, I'm open to any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? I don't see any. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other neutral testimony? Senator Bostelman, you're welcome to close.
Thank you, Chairwoman Geist. First, I'd like to thank all the testifiers who came in today. I thought it was good testimony. I would like to ask that if they did not provide their comments, and if they could give that to me when they walk out, so I know what, it's a little hard to hear, so I know what their thoughts were on it, so we can work on that, because we're committed to work on that. I thought the committee asked some very good questions. This is an issue that we have dealt with in committee for years. I think we've come a long ways with this bill. I think we've come a long ways in answering a lot of the questions and opposition that we've had on the bill previously. To Senator DeKay's question before on members, on page 2, lines 12 through 15 will answer your question. That's where they're specified on. And Senator Frederickson, I think we ought to talk about 10,000. Why the 10,000? Talking with those in the industry, that's kind of the breaking point. If you get more, say, no disruption is minor, but if you get the more serious ones, that's kind of the debarkation right there at that 10,000. That's why it's at that point right now. This is maybe I can categorize or state it in this way if I may. It's a responsive process. As I was listening, what we're talking about is a responsive process for corrective or adjudicative resolution. It's something we haven't had before, and that's what we're moving for, is to try to eliminate. I think the fire marshal mentioned 200, potentially 200, if you look in the fiscal note, potentially 200 calls. The whole point of this is to reduce or eliminate that. And we're already looking at, I think the Attorney General in there was 20 to 40 calls that the fire marshal already does. So that means gas lines are being cut. That means power lines are being cut. That means significant risk to life to those around that area. And that's the point of what we're working at. I think it's one of the things we're dealing with. I think everyone understands that and recognizes that. The fire marshal already investigates those. So that investigative arm is already there. Makes sense to have them investigate this whenever we have these type of issues that arise. And, before in testimony, what we've heard in this bill, if you remember, is sometimes they don't even file the complaint. It ain't worth it. No one's going to look into it. No corrective action. So this really puts something in place now that maybe we'll start addressing a lot of those issues that we do see happen that may not be reported across the state. As the Attorney General representative spoken, this is an outlier. DHHS, everybody else in the state has something similar to this. This is the only part of the state that we don't. The only agency, only department, only area in the state that we don't have something similar to this commission. This committee can be set up to handle these type of things. So I think it's a great opportunity to move things forward within the state. I look forward to working with those who have comments and questions, concerns with the bill as it is, and then working with the committee to move this bill out for general file. So with that, I'll end my testimony on LB 122 and be glad to answer any other questions you may have.
Well, I thank you for what you've done. We have heard this for many years, and it does seem like we're closer than we've been. So you're doing good work. Are there any other questions? Yes, Senator DeKay.
Just a quick comment. Senator Bostelman, I appreciate you bringing this bill forward. I'm new to this process, but I have been aware of what's been going on over the past several years with this. Like I said, I appreciate you bringing it forward. I think that every party involved here wants the same end result. I think we're getting very close to where we need to be, that everybody's going to be happy with where we are at the end of the day with this bill. So where we can go from here to tie up any loose ends, I appreciate your efforts in doing that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? I do not see any. That will end testimony and the hearing for LB 122. There are letters, actually, 6 proponents, 2 opponents, and 1 neutral for LB 22. And with that, we will end the hearing. Thank you very much.